All right. Welcome back, everyone. And thank you so much for being with us. My name is Matt Cotty, and this is my good friend, Kristina Orlova. And we are doing this series on taboo thoughts and intrusive thoughts. So in part number one, we covered the idea of, what type of intrusive thoughts people deal with. In part number two, we talked about how it's really not a thought problem. It's a wheel problem. It's this OCD wheel, and the compulsions that we engage in are what fuel the wheel, right? So today, what I want to do is we tie up this 3-part series is really talk about, okay, well, how do we break out of this? Now we understand the problem. Okay. Like we get it, but what do we do? Right.
Yep.
So Kristina, like, what are really the kind of fundamental tools that one would use if you're looking to overcome something like this?
Yeah. So one of the number one first tools is it's an evidence-based tool. It's known as exposure response prevention. It's one of the aspects of ways we do cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's really specifically for OCD. We also want to incorporate acceptance commitment therapy processes, and then of course mindfulness. And
so like just to because I mean obviously you and I know what that is, but let's break that down for a second. So
yeah.
A lot of people hear all these things, right? And they're like, okay, well, God, I need to do all this stuff. And, they get just overwhelmed hearing about this stuff, right? So when we're talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Like just breaking that down as a thing, what we're talking about here is working from a cognition standpoint and a behavioral standpoint, meaning a thought process and behavioral process. That's all cognitive behavioral therapy really means. We're incorporating both of those things. Now, ERP on the other is a tool underneath that umbrella, right?
That's right.
And it stands for exposure and response prevention. So can you tell us a little bit more in an in-depth way of like, or I guess kind of a high level way, what is exposure and response prevention?
Yeah. So essentially what kind of the principle, so I always like to tell people that, if you can grasp the principles, then it can become easier to start to actually incorporate and move into doing this work.
Sure.
And really one of the principles is you want to recognize that, when you really understand how OCD works, is that the more you compulsively respond to it, the more you're actually entrenching and kind of locking everything up.
Right.
So what you want to do instead is something that's going to feel really counterintuitive, which is instead of running away from or hiding from it, you want to expose yourself and face the thing that's causing you discomfort. Right. So that's a general principle. And that's something we know in general when we're working with fears,
right,
is that the best way to overcome a fear is by actually finding a way to face it. And of course, there's different steps you can take and how you can break things down to do that. But that's really the first principle, is recognizing that, by avoiding the fear, whatever the fear is, you actually are making it bigger and it becomes worse. And then even just the thought of it will be crippling. Right. But when you expose and you find your way to make contact with it, you actually start to learn. You get to have real new data take place. So you get to really see what's actually happening and how scary is it really? And can I really actually maybe get through it? Can I do more than I anticipated? And when you actually incorporate response prevention, so recognizing that, what would it be like if this time, I didn't do my compulsion the way that I do, or even skipped it altogether and kind of experiment and see what happens. You now proactively are really getting to execute this whole kind of new way of researching and studying your own behavioral patterns to see what actually happens. So,
right.
So if you can grasp those principles, then you can start to understand that, okay, so I have a way that I can actually work with my fear brain, right, with my anxiety, in order to kind of really relearn what's actually going on here.
Right. And so like, I wasn't one that got good grades in school. So to simplify it, right, on that level of exposure response prevention, right, exposing it, you're confronting the thing you're afraid of. Now I can already hear in the people's minds that are listening to this, Matt, does that mean I really need to engage in bestiality to overcome this? It's
right.
Like, no,
I know. I already had that thought.
No, it doesn't. Okay. Because again, we're not dealing with that content problem. What we're dealing with is a doubt or uncertainty about that problem. And what we're really exposing ourselves to is the uncertainty, is the idea of, I don't know. And instead of trying to solve the I don't know, it's staying with the uncertainty and that activation. And then the response prevention, of course, is just the compulsion elimination. Like if I had to summarize exposure response prevention in like one sentence, to be compulsion free.
Yep.
Right? Like that's it. Like again, we're switching from the idea of I'm going to try to solve the content. We're switching from the idea of I'm going to try to solve the thoughts, or I'm going to try to solve the anxiety. My whole goal is to be compulsion free. Right. And so, and obviously this looks very different for each person. And this isn't something that you're going to just do in one day where, you're not going to come into my or Kristina's office and we're going to tell you, oh, just don't do compulsions. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Right.
Bye. And so, yeah, cool. And the same thing, right? It's the same thing where your other therapists will tell you, well, just stop worrying about it, like, yeah, that's all you need to do. Just stop worrying. It's like, okay, yeah, thanks for the help on that. Right. When someone's working on a specific fear, maybe we can talk about some examples of what ERP would look like with a more taboo idea to make sure we understand that. I guess one of the main principles I also really articulate with exposure and response, and I know you do the same, but it's really the idea in exposure and response prevention, no one ever gets hurt. Right. There is a safety first mechanism that is exposure response prevention, meaning if you have taboo thoughts about running someone over with a car, right, we don't ever do that. Okay. There's never anyone that gets hurt in this process, right? What you're doing is facing the internal distress within about an idea. Okay. So like safety it's very, very clear. I want you guys to understand, if you're listening to this, that this is a safety, like safety first is always a priority. Okay.
Yeah. Or like I tell people too, that you have to recognize that some things that pop in your head, or some of the fears and intrusions are not appropriate to do live, right? Like we have to use a little bit of critical thinking here. Like obviously we're not gonna say, like if I'm scared, what if I'm a pedophile? I mean, obviously we're not, like it's immoral, it's unethical. So we have to recognize that we're not talking about that, right?
Right.
We're talking about really dealing with your fears, with your worry thoughts and the feelings, right? And there's different exercises we have to get at that, right? To really learn how to work with, live situations or things that are in your head, so that you can then go ahead and expose yourself to that worry and fear.
So like a good example, right, with that one, right? I remember I was working with someone and that struggled with the fear of pedophilia. And one of the things we did was we just walked by a park. Like that was an exposure, because they were afraid of parks because the parks triggered up thoughts. So the exposure was actually walking by a park, having the thoughts flood up and not engaging in those compulsions. Right. That was the exposure. It had nothing to do with kids. It had to do with, we're going to stimulate the thoughts and stimulate the feelings by walking through a park, or writing down a thought, or writing a narrative, or all these other things we can do, but the exposure is activating that internal fight or flight response and those intrusive thoughts, and then not engaging in the behaviors.
Yeah. I have another example from that. Really, like I had, I love little Post-its sometimes. Those are like my little tools. So like I had a mom write a bad word on it that, connected to pedophilia concept, and had her put it in her back pocket. And all we did is this was actually pre-COVID. Since COVID, we'll still do things like this. We just found other ways. But the concept is, like go reach out to like an elementary school and ask some questions about their program. Like how much does it cost? How many kids? Like, what do you do? Right. But you have that little word in your pocket.
Right.
So like that right there. And again, with COVID, all that meant is, hey, maybe we do a call, or we set up like a little intro video call. So you're still having that interaction with this person, but you're like, there's everything's right there around you, and everything is triggered, and now it's in your pocket, or the Post-it is on your computer and you're talking, and right. And again, that's the point. The point is to face those situations and watch what comes up while you're actively working on challenging and catching and recognizing what an urge is, what it feels like, because that's part of the thing here is you have to kind of retrain yourself to learn what is an urge anyway.
Right. And really, again, what exposure and response prevention really is about is like, we are, because with many of our compulsions, it's all a reaction. It's almost subconscious. Right. I mean, I remember for me anyway, when I was really stuck in OCD, like I would start doing compulsive behaviors without even realizing I was doing them. right? Because I was such in that, I was in that survival state so deep that I would just be like already ruminating. And then like people would like, Matt, are you all right? I'm like, oh gosh, like I'd have to like snap myself out of it.
Mhm.
And because it can become so habitual that what we're really looking to do is to break these reactive habits that we have that are fueling this cycle. And again, to respond, right? So differentiating that idea of reacting and responding, we're responding in a healthier way and ultimately proving to ourselves that this really isn't dangerous. It's not, I shouldn't be activating my fight or flight response because of this thought. Right.
Exactly. And like you said, exactly. I usually use the words with, you're an autopilot, right? So when you're an autopilot, you're not even there. You're just, like you said, habitually, right? It's merely the fact that you just didn't know any better. So you've practiced those responses so much, they've got really ingrained into your system. So it's like, it's gotten so conditioned in there that you just kind of default right to it. Yeah. And so with exposure response prevention, you get to literally recondition, retrain yourself, and you get to put conscious awareness, shed light on the stuff so that you get out of that autopilot mode, so that you're not just habitually, doing whatever you do without even being aware of it, but that you actually become aware and you get to realize you have choice. There's an area where you have choice, which just makes all the difference in the world.
Right. And creating that space is really the first step that you're talking about, right? Is that space of recognizing I have a choice of how I'm going to respond to this, because so many people are so lost that they don't even realize, one, that they're lost, and two, that they're actually making choices. They just like, because I often hear people say things like, well, no, I have to do this.
Yes.
And I say,
yes.
What do you mean you have to do it? Does everyone have to do this? Okay, well, why do you? Right? Like, Matt, no, you don't understand. I have to count to 127 once I go through this doorway. And I'm like, okay, well, I didn't do that. Like, what's going to happen if I don't do that? You know what I mean? Well, no, it's not just you, it's just me. And it's like, well, hold on. Let's challenge this idea, right? Because if we're operating from the idea of I have to do something or I can't do something, like, I'm sure you hear it time and again, Matt or Kristina, I can't go to that school.
Yeah.
And in our job in many ways. And, and like, I tell people very, very frequently, right, when I'm working with them, like, look, like, you're not going to like me, because my job is so paradoxical from what most people think therapy is. And here's the issue a lot of times, and I'm sure you've seen this time and again as well, is that someone will go to talk therapists and therapists that don't understand ERP and OCD, and the therapist will become their compulsion.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Sometimes sessions become compulsions. Sometimes the treatment itself becomes a compulsion. So that's the thing of it is understanding that anything can become a compulsion. But when you, again, learn the principles of how this all works, then you know how to pivot yourself and apply those principles even when that happens.
Right. And that's why, like, one of the reasons that, I'm such a fan of Kristina in the first place is because, we operate from such a similar philosophy in the sense that anyone we work with, like, our goal is to teach them to become their own therapist.
Yep. Exactly right.
I mean, because at the end of it, if I'm working with someone, and one of the reasons we're running this workshop, right, coming up here on the 27th, is because if I'm working with someone and I am their resource of how they get better, the day I'm not available, that person's in big trouble.
That's right.
Right. And that's why what we aim to do is to equip you with the skill set. So whenever OCD pops up, because it will pop up at the most inopportune times. We know that, ladies and gentlemen, we got to expect that. In fact, oh, you're having a wedding. Oh, okay. Guess what? I would reckon that OCD is probably going to try to peek its head in there and see what it can get. Oh, you're moving, you're changing jobs, you're having a baby. This thing just happened in my life. Okay, let's get ready, because it's going to look for every opportunity that it can to throw these thoughts so that you do compulsion, so it stays alive. Like, when you really understand that OCD is its own life force in many ways, and you have the ability to starve it to death by not doing compulsions, that's the shift of this game. here.
I love that you said that. I'm a little Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, there's some life force and you can break it
yeah,
down.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Jedi. But no, I mean, it's because it like my hope is at this point in this series, if you've been with us the whole time, most people start with this idea of I have this content problem, whatever it is, right? Like sexuality, harm, racism, XYZ. I have these thoughts and I don't want them.
Yeah.
And everything that the paradox is everything you've been doing to try to get rid of the thoughts is actually the thing that's kept you stuck.
That's right.
And so when we switch to the idea of, no, wait, hold on, you actually have a behavior problem.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what, and then, but by removing your behaviors, what happens is you get to now start trying to remove something that you're in control of, because when you try to remove your thoughts, like we know that doesn't work. Try not to think of a white bear for 5 seconds. Okay. Guess what? There it is. Right. I mean, but that's the point, right? Is that once we shift to the thing that we're in control of, well, now we have power in the game.
Exactly. And that's exactly what ERP helps us do. And then we have ACT, right? We have acceptance commitment therapy. And actually I wanted to, also ask you kind of if we can talk a little bit about that, and kind of how does that work, and kind of what do you do?
So my philosophy with ACT, and again, there's people that will disagree and agree and whatever, that's fine. How I've found to have it be the most effective is I think ACT serves a great purpose as a transitional tool from ERP to everyday life, right? Because there's this point of ERP where we do ERP and we actually calm the mind and the body down, right? Where eventually we're reappraising these thoughts and seeing them as just thoughts, right? Our body's not actually, once we do ERP to the point where our body calms down and that habituation process and neuroplasticity is taking place, which happens through ERP, then there's this idea of, okay, well, now what? Because like now, oftentimes, if you've been worrying about something for 7 years, there's this like rebuilding of life that we have to engage in, I mean, I've worked with several people that have been housebound. I mean, no job, no friends, no anything. And it's like, okay, now we got to start building. Right.
Yeah.
And there is going to be a component of, well, there's going to be flare-ups, right? On this journey, there isn't this day where I had OCD and now I don't have OCD anymore.
Right.
What's going to happen is that there's going to be this, like you get out of the lens and you're feeling like yourself again, but the OCD is going to be there trying to rope you back in from time to time. And so ACT really allows us to, through the like 6 pillars of acceptance, right? Present moment awareness, mindfulness, value-based decisions, committed action, cognitive diffusion, and self as context. Once we understand that we're the observer of the thoughts, once we understand that our goal really is to accept the present moment as it is. So if I have a thought that I don't like, the more I can work with the idea that my brain can produce anything, and I'm going to be willing and open that door to say, you know what, brain, I give you permission to produce any thought you want. I'm not going to have this box here where, brain, you can only produce these thoughts, and these thoughts are absolute no-go. Because if I have that box, what do you think OCD is going to latch onto? Right? It's going to be like, whoa, there's the ammunition, right? Oh, that's why I got it. Got him. And then really living by your values. So there's this kind of component of we stack ACT on top of the principles of ERP already. And we use that as a good tool to stack on top of it to start building and living the kind of life you really want to live. Because if there's a tragedy of OCD and which again, I'm encompassing all OCD, we're talking about taboo thoughts on this series, but the real tragedy of OCD is the amount of time it takes from you that you will never get back. That's like if I look at my own experience, it's like, I lost years of my life that I will never get back. And I, I have to sit with that and really be honest with that. And that's why the tools are really me deciding, hey, do I want to give another minute of my life to OCD, or do I want to live life on my terms? It's never that I achieved full certainty about my fears. What it is I said, you know what, living this life that I have is more important to me than giving it away to OCD. And that's the 100%. Choice right there. And then so ACT and we can talk about that much more obviously on the
yes,
on the workshop, but so ERP is really the cornerstone, right?
yes,
A lot of people want to just jump to ACT, right? Because
yes,
ERP is scary, right?
yep,
And again, in my experience, I don't advise that. I don't think that's a good idea, because I think that it has its place in the skill set, but I think it supplements ERP perfectly in the
yes.
transitional time after you've done ERP. But you can't have your cake without going through the work, man. It's like you got to do the ERP aspect. You can't keep doing compulsions and do ACT. That doesn't work.
Exactly. That's what I tell
know?
people all the time. You're trying to get some magic bullet and solution, but you're trying to do it by bypassing something that you can't bypass. You can't.
Right.
It's like you can't just like open my brain and go, okay, wait, here's the OCD. I don't
Yeah.
want it.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
It's kind of like, hey, I want a really good marriage, Matt, but this whole like talking out problems thing, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Can we just have the love making and stuff? You know what I mean? It's like,
no.
Yeah, no, actually you need it, got to do it all here.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, yeah, it's the whole package. And so,
that's a funny analogy, but that's a good one. It makes the point. Like, if you want to be in a relationship, you got to communicate. Like, you can't bypass that.
Yeah. And with ERP, the value you get from ERP, as tough as it might be at times, the value you get is who you become through it.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like because you build confidence to face fear, and you get to take that confidence into every fear that comes your way in the future.
Right. Exactly.
It's like, I would never trade going through ERP. You know what I mean? Like I for anything, because I think it was one of the most valuable things I ever did.
Oh, 100%. And to be honest, knowing that I have those tools and I think for anybody listening, I want you to really grasp that when you really master these tools and anytime, your brain gets a little stuck, the beautiful thing is that you know exactly what to do and when to do it, right? And so it's like knowing all the tools you have at your disposal, and then the timing of what to do when, right? So ERP, ACT, and in ACT we also talked about mindfulness and living in a present way, and living in a way where and one thing I talked about mindfulness is not just waiting and doing it only when you're stressed, because you can start to do mindfulness as a compulsion, right? But really using that as this additional training that you're doing throughout the whole treatment, as part of increasing that self-awareness muscle, and really making sure that you're actively allowing yourself to develop it. And literally when you practice it like that, and that can be, a 5-minute guided meditation, it could be a 10-minute one, a 15-minute one, it can be a walk, where you're just focusing on everything you're seeing around you or what you're hearing. You can use your senses, but where you're really proactively training yourself in that way. Right. And there's so much research and studies that have shown how effective it is in terms of helping your brain and your being learn how to literally just stop and slow down and be with whatever is in the moment, whatever is.
And realizing that with ACT, that's the only thing you're really accepting is what is right now. It's not, you're not accepting a terrible scenario in the future. What you're accepting is what is happening right now. Right.
Exactly.
And the more, like you said, it's a muscle, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And with mindfulness, the first thing you should really start doing is just noticing how unmindful you really are.
Yeah.
Like when you drive a car and you get to your destination, you're like, I was just thinking the whole time, oh God, I hope I didn't run any red lights. You know what I mean? Because you're so in your head all the time. And so the practice of being lost in thought is very common. So mindfulness is really working against that whole practice. And so, and really, so when we're talking about the tools here, they all work together, right? There's not this, like, I only want to pick this tool. It's like, it all comes together, you know? And that's why, so, and what happens eventually though, with these tools is that if you actually don't respond to the thoughts as if they are threats, your brain starts recategorizing them as nothing, and your brain doesn't want to waste energy. So it stops producing them because you're teaching your brain they're not important.
Exactly. Right.
And so you get the result in a very backwards way. Right.
Yeah. That's always tell people it's going to be super counterintuitive.
Yeah. It's a very counterintuitive process. Absolutely. And that's the thing about this thing. And so, what we want to extend to you guys right now is an invitation to go deeper with us on this, right? Because we really hope that you found this series valuable. And if this is something you struggle with, the thing is it won't go away on its own. I mean, my bet is you guys know that by now, right? You guys have probably tried everything and you can, and you're here. And what we are doing is we're doing a live workshop
Yes.
to go deeper into all of these, talk about real case studies, real exposure processes, and also giving you that Q&A live time to get guidance from us, right? You know, in a coaching mindset of like, hey, what should I do specifically for this? Okay, cool. And we're able to all learn from each other. And we're holding that on the 27th of October. And the great news is that we've made it super cheap, and we're really doing it to try to get as many people as possible. But again, because it is going to be live on Zoom, there is a limited seats that are going to be available. So make sure to go register and to claim your seat, because we don't want you to miss out on this, right? And if this is something you struggle with, you deserve to take your life back from this, and you don't have to stay stuck. And, you know, because like, and Kristina and I can both attest to how dark things can get, but we also can attest to what it's like on the other side of that fence.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
And that's what makes us in this workshop different, is like, we're not talking from theory. We're not talking from something we read in a book. We're talking from real life experience. And we want to give that to you, so you have that. So, so all you need to do is down in the notes, there's a link where you can get registered. If you go to Restored Minds /workshop, that will be where you can register as well. And again, we are going to have that cutoff time. So you'll see on the date, the last time to register. And if you don't, then you're going to miss out. So please make sure you do that. And just first and foremost, just thank you so much, Kristina, for being with me on this. I've really enjoyed this series with you.
Thank you, Matt.
And I look forward to our workshop on the 27th.
Absolutely. Me too.
All right. We'll see you there.
Bye.
All right. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for watching that video. And so if you're struggling with OCD and anxiety, I just wanted to let you know that we have a free training for you over at Restored Minds, where you can start learning how to use our AAA response to really break out of that loop and ultimately take back control of your life. And all you need to do to access is just click the little link below, and you'll be taken to a page where you can register today. Thank you so much.